Hey guys, this is Pat Gallen from CBS3. This is my new thing. It's called Philly Sports and Other Stuff with Pat Gallen. You can see it on CBSPhilly.com right now. And today is an athletic double dip. First, I get to talk with one of the best ever to do it in the world of journalism. Jayson Stark from The Athletic and MLB Network joins me to talk about what could happen with baseball season and what is currently happening with baseball season. So we'll talk with him about that. And then a little bit later on, I talk with Sheil Kapadia of The Athletic, an NFL writer. He's a Philly guy. So we break down the Eagles' schedule. But first, with Jayson Stark, we know that minute by minute, hour by hour, things are changing when it comes to the world of sports and the coronavirus. He is as plugged in as anyone in the baseball world. So who better to go to than the Hall of Famer, Jayson Stark? Here he is. I am here with the great Hall of Famer, journalist, Mr. Jayson Stark. Jayson, how are you, my friend? It's been a while.
Pat, doing well. Great to see you. How are you?
Hanging in there, I guess, best we all can without there being sports. It's just
Yeah.
the world we're living in these days. But how are you staying? How are you staying sane and staying safe these days?
I learned a long time ago that in a perfect world, there are stories that I would much rather be telling. We can't tell those stories right now. So we're telling different kinds of stories. There's still people who love sports, care about sports, want to read about sports and hear about sports. And the goal is just let's connect with those people however we can. You're in the same boat.
No doubt about it. Now's the time to be as creative as ever without there being live sports. But you're a baseball man. Everyone wants to know, will there be baseball this year? When will there be baseball? Do you have any answers for people when they ask you these questions?
Well, I think there's the best case world, and then there's all the other ways it could go. The best case world I think is spring training would start in about a month somewhere, last for about 3 weeks, and then they would start up in July and play about 100 games. But this is like Doug Peterson calling a play, and if the receiver's covered, then you've got option B, option C, option D. That's baseball right now. They have so many options on the table that it could go a million different ways, including, sadly, no season at all.
Which none of us is hoping for, but that's just the reality of the situation with the coronavirus taking over. Your colleague at The Athletic, Ken Rosenthal, just released an article a couple of hours ago, and he mentioned that Cleveland Indians sort of moving in that direction, acting as if there would be that timeline that you just mentioned. Do you foresee any other teams kind of doing that as well, just to get themselves ready?
I think what that was, from my understanding, is the Indians want people to be ready. If all goes well, that scenario I just laid out for you, spring training, early June, that is a target. It's a moving target, but it is a target. And they just want players to be ready, coaches to be ready, team employees to be ready and gear up, because we've all just been drifting along now for 7 weeks. That's really what that was. What that story says is exactly what I'm hearing, which is there is no one firm, definitive plan. Everything that you have heard or read about, is some combination of planning, dreaming, and hoping.
Do you have a gut feeling right now on which way this might be headed, or is it just, hey, we're waiting for the doctors and the scientists to tell us when to proceed?
Yeah, I'll tell you my sense of this, and that is that everyone is incredibly motivated to play and find a way to play some kind of season. It won't be a normal season, obviously, but then what kind of season? I think that depends on several things. First off, is there a path to playing in front of fans? I don't see one. Is there a path to playing with fairly normal travel? That's unknown. And so that's going to have a lot to do with whether they start in home ballparks or in these hubs that you've been reading about, Arizona, Florida, Texas, could be other places. And then the third thing, obviously, this is really the first thing, and that is health. What do health conditions tell them is possible? And they're really trying to listen to health officials and follow that lead. And so it could go a lot of ways. Somebody told me just the other day that even they could see even spring training part or 2.0 starting and them still not knowing exactly what's ahead. Just be one more way to get ready while still buying time. Too many unknowns.
How about from the player's perspective? I'm sure you've talked to a lot of different major league players across the board. What's the sense that you get from them? Because really they're the ones that would have the bullseye on their back, so to speak.
Yeah, players want to play, and I don't think there's any doubt about that, but there are a lot of hurdles that have to be cleared. And one of the big ones, what we just talked about, health. Doug Glanville and I had Sean Doolittle on our Starkville podcast just this week. He's the closer for the Nationals, and his wife, as they've both freely admitted, has a health condition. She would be at risk. She's had severe asthma that has developed into pneumonia at quite a few different points in her life, and so she's one of those family members who's at risk. So can he just go to the ballpark and come home and not worry about putting her at risk? These are real life questions that baseball players have to grapple with. And then, of course, there's the whole money aspect of it. I think teams are going to be pretty adamant that they would expect players to take some sort of hit in salary. And we're talking, about millions of dollars. So you should always follow the money. And I would follow it again in this case.
I'm glad you brought up the Sean Doolittle podcast with you and Doug Glanville. I read the Athletic article that you posted after the podcast, and I found it interesting just how candid he was about how he thinks Major League Baseball is going to change from this point forward. Handshakes, high fives, spitting, all of these different things, really interesting when you think about the sport returning and how different it's going to look.
Yeah, it's hard to conceive of life on the other side, but it's not going to look like we remember it. Right? Do you know any member of the species that spits more than baseball players? I don't. Okay, and so in Korea, where they just started up baseball this week, there is actually a rule against spitting, and that's where we are, and that's where baseball is going to be. But I asked him about the high five. He said the high five's dead. The post-game handshake line, got to come up with something else there. The more you start thinking about all the stuff that we take for granted and baseball players take for granted, they're going to have to rethink all of it and make up new rituals on the fly. I don't know how many times baseball players high five in a day, but what is it, like 90, 100, 1,000? There's going to be a lot of stuff that they're going to have to work through that we haven't even contemplated.
It's insane. It's wild that I'm sure that when you got into writing about baseball, you thought it would end up this way, right?
Yeah, sure. This is exactly what I dreamed of.
Well, then let me ask you this. What do you miss most about it?
Baseball's a game which has these incredible rhythms to it, and it's got that daily rhythm of there's a game every day, every night, and it becomes part of the fabric. I don't know about everybody's life, but certainly my life. And I miss watching. I miss all the people who I would see and talk to. I miss all the crazy stuff that happens all the time that I live for. I miss everything about it because that's just me. But, more than anything, I just miss its presence. Baseball is a friend. It's always there every day for 6 months. In my case, for like 9 months. And I miss seeing my friend. I miss hanging out.
Yeah, it's sad. And what's interesting is that, maybe over the last decade or so, people have not been flocking to baseball the way they used to. But you're feeling this overwhelming sense of, man, I just wish it was an option. I just wish it was there. I miss it. Even if you're not fully invested in the game, really, we could use that right now.
Yeah, I'm so far down the rabbit hole that I'm checking the box scores of these simulated seasons that our site's doing, Baseball Reference is doing. There was a crazy Phillies Braves game on Baseball Reference yesterday in which Hector Neris blew a 3-1 lead in the ninth against the Braves. And then there's 2 out, nobody on. Andrew McCutchen bunt hit, JT Realmuto walk-off triple. Like, I actually thought, wow, that's pretty cool. I wish I'd seen that. And then I realized that's the other universe. This is not real life, but it's the only universe that we got now. And so I know there are many more serious things to worry about in the world, but I find myself getting wrapped up in stuff like that. I know at Baseball Reference, they've told me the Phillies got off to a 4-14 start, and Philadelphians were so outraged. They were actually hearing from people saying, you got to fire Joe Girardi. Now, he hadn't managed an actual game, right? But he was 4-14 in this other universe. And we all need to get a grip. We do.
For people that don't know, the Baseball Reference is doing a season simulation. And I had been paying attention a little bit as well. It did not start off well. I think Bryce Harper's only got like 4 home runs into May. So I'm sure people wouldn't be very happy with that.
Yeah, good news, though. Reese Hoskins is now over the Mendoza line. So things are trending north.
Fingers crossed.
Wait, it's not real life. Sorry.
Exactly. I have been going back. Obviously, we've got a lot of time in No Live Sports. I've been going back and watching a lot of old games. And one that stood out that is one of my earliest baseball memories is the 1991 World Series, like the Kirby Puckett home run in Game 6 and then the Jack Morris game in Game 7.
Yeah.
You have lived through so many huge moments in baseball history and written about them. Have you gone back and allowed yourself to watch any of these old games again?
Oh, yeah, of course. I watched the Jack Morris game. It still gave me chills. And I once, at one point, I live tweeted Game 6 of the 2011 World Series, and I was getting all kinds of angry tweets from Rangers fans. Make it stop. And I've watched a bunch of these classic Phillies games. I watched Game 5 of the 2008 World Series, both Part 1 and Part 2, because it was amazing how much I didn't remember. I just remember it raining. And so, again, you really get sucked down the rabbit hole. It's so easy to forget what year it is. You turn on the TV, Mike Schmidt's coming to home plate. Jack Nicklaus is winning the Masters. And you're thinking, wait, what? What is happening? But I think that's a question we're now asking ourselves pretty much every day.
That is unfortunately the world we live in. Well, Jayson, I appreciate catching up with you. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but you and I are former colleagues. We used to host a radio show together, and it was a lot of fun. I miss those days. I'd love to go back to those days right now.
I miss them too. The old Jayson Stark show with Pat Gallen hosting. Those were golden moments, my friend.
In both of our careers, I'm sure. Jayson, thank you so much, my friend. Stay safe. And I can't wait for baseball to come back. I'm sure you're feeling the same way.
Yeah, glad to join you, and be well yourself.
Always a pleasure catching up with my former colleague. I get to say that I worked with a Hall of Famer in a former life at an old radio station. Jayson Stark, he is the best. I know that we are all certainly hoping for baseball season to come back. Now, we're hoping that the NFL season goes on as planned, and the NFL released its schedule on Thursday, so I broke it down via Zoom with Sheil Kapadia, one of the best NFL writers out there. He works for The Athletic, and we kind of broke down where the problem spots might be and more with the Eagles' schedule. Sheil, the NFL schedule was released on Thursday. Let's talk specifically about the Eagles and their schedule, just looking at it sort of macro view. What do you think of it?
I think it's a tough schedule. You kind of do the exercise that we all have done in Philadelphia for at least since I was old enough to watch sports, and you go game by game and go win, loss. And there aren't a lot of gimmies. So, there aren't those games where sometimes you look at it in May and you can circle and say that's a guaranteed win. So on one hand, that's not good. On the other hand, there's a lot of entertaining games, a lot of entertaining matchups. So obviously we don't know exactly what's going to happen with the NFL, but there are some fun matchups on the schedule for sure.
You're right about there not being many gimmies. They go through a couple of really tough stretches within the 17 weeks. Can you kind of dig into those a little?
Yeah, I think there's two that really stand out. One is weeks 4 to 6, where they have this stretch where they go to San Francisco to play the 49ers, obviously a team that made the Super Bowl last year. They come back, then they have to go at Pittsburgh against the Steelers, who they could be a very good team this year. And then they're home against the Baltimore Ravens, a team that was 14-2 a year ago. So that's going to be a really tough stretch early in the season. And then you get later in the season, they've got a stretch where they've got the Seahawks at home, obviously a team that knocked them out of the postseason last year. They go to Green Bay in December. Who knows what that could possibly look like? And they face the Packers. And then they come back home, and they've got to play the Saints, a team that was very good last year. All three of those were playoff teams last year. So those are kind of the two stretches that really stood out to me.
You mentioned not a lot of gimmies. I think people would maybe point to a Browns game or a Bengals game as like, okay, we can win those. But even those aren't really gimmies anymore. They have struggled against the Bengals, and they're going at Cleveland, which we don't know what the Browns are going to look like this year. We know what they've looked like for the last 2+ decades, but anything is possible in this league. And when you go on the road, certainly anything's possible. So a lot of those games that maybe the fans want to think are gimmies just really aren't.
Absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, that first Bengals game, I think the Bengals are going to be one of the most improved teams in the NFL. You know, they had the first overall pick. They get Joe Burrow, the quarterback, and he looks like somebody who can come in and play well right away. So that should be a fun game early in the season. And then, like you mentioned, you know, the Browns made a lot of changes this offseason. Their new GM is Andrew Berry, who was with the Eagles here in previous seasons. So they made a lot of upgrades. They have a lot of talent. They were a train wreck last year. I think, Pat, as long as we've been alive, they've been a train wreck most seasons. But this could be a season where they're at least mediocre and competitive. So, yeah, I don't think that's a gimme game either.
All right, when you go week by week on this schedule, how does it play out for you? I know this is a futile task, but we do it anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a tradition. So I was going through it last night when the schedule came out. I have them at 9-7. I think it is a tough schedule. I think they're going to have a lot of streaks. I had them winning the first 3, losing the next 3. So a lot of ups and downs, which we're used to here in this city, keep everyone entertained throughout the year. And I think they're going to be competitive. I think they'll be in the mix for a playoff spot. Remember last year, it came down to that late game against the Cowboys, week 16. Well, they play the Cowboys again in week 16 this year. This time it is in Dallas. So very well, the NFC East could come down to that late game in Dallas.
What do you think of the NFL releasing the schedule the way they did? You think this was the right move?
You know, I looked at it and I said there's no real harm in it. I don't think you should come out and say, hey, we're 100% doing the schedule. Everything's going to be fine. We all know that's not the case, how much things are changing day to day, week to week. So I don't have a huge issue with them releasing it. And then if you look at some of the stuff with the schedule, there are a lot of contingency plans, you know, whether they have to move the season back 2 weeks, whether they have to move it back 4 weeks, whether they have to remove some games, push the Super Bowl back. I mean, all these things are in play. None of us know what's going to happen. But to me, as long as you're not arrogant about it, saying, hey, everything's going to be good, these games are going to be played, it's kind of like everything else. We're looking ahead and saying, hey, maybe this could be something to look forward to in the fall, knowing that that's no guarantee.
You mentioned 9-7. Why do you think the Eagles can get to that number? And how do you think the division is going to be?
I think it's, I think one thing that the Eagles are lucky with is that there's 2 teams in the division that are really among the worst in the NFL, the Giants and Washington. So, again, no game is a gimme, but those are 4 games where they're going to be probably touchdown favorites in all of those games. So that's working for them. I wasn't in love with their offseason. I like some of the moves. I still think they have a lot of question marks, but a lot of this comes down to quarterback, coach, and maybe defensive coordinator. And I do believe in those guys for the Eagles. Carson Wentz, Doug Peterson, Jim Schwartz, those 3 guys kind of put them a step ahead of a lot of other teams in the NFL. So it might not always be pretty. I think they have a ceiling where they could be a really good team, a double-digit win team. And obviously you need the quarterback to stay healthy.
What are you working on over there at The Athletic?
Well, we looked at this schedule for sure, and now we're kind of doing some deep dives into the Eagles and some other teams here in the months ahead. You know, the draft is behind us, and now it's kind of that time where you look ahead. who are going to be the really good teams, who are going to be the bad teams, what has to go right for things to work well for the Eagles. So operating as if the season is going to start in September, knowing that who knows if that's going to be the case, but certainly you have all that season preview stuff to look ahead to.
Sheila, I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. Good talking to you.